Good evening, everybody. Happy Friday, and welcome my he said family. This is Alvin King, and welcome to another episode of He Said. I hope you guys have had a great week. I certainly have. There's been a lot of ups and downs, but at any rate, in our industry, we call it bob and weave, and that's what I've been doing all week. So hopefully, you guys are doing well. And I'm not even going to belabor this because we have an action-packed show for you tonight. This is our episode where we're honoring Juneteenth, and the show topic tonight is Black activism from 1865 to 1877. So let me get my co-host in here tonight, Mr. Vash and Mr. Saladin there. How are you guys?
Hey, great. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you. And before I forget, because sometimes I do forget things, I want to give a special kudo to Mr. Saladin there for tonight producing this segment of the show. He is our historian that has had us on point all week, and we are ready to have a wonderful show. We have a very special guest for you tonight who I'll introduce later on, but I just want to jump right into the show. You guys ready?
Yes. Can we send some love out to Jacques and to his mom? Jacques is not with us because his mom had an incident this week, and I would like to send love to him and his family as they care for her, and I wish them all the best.
Mm-hmm.
We miss
you. Jacques.
Absolutely.
Sending love your way.
Jacques.
Okay, sending love your way. Thank you. And also our listeners our viewers are on. We have Rose who's on right now, who's just come on. How you doing, Rose? Well, hopefully everybody will sign on and we will see them, but we're going to jump right into our show tonight and get everything rolling. So are you guys ready?
Yes, indeed.
All right.
We're ready. Let's go for it.
Okay. The Civil War and the Reconstruction period that followed formed the pivotal era of American history. Reconstruction had been dated from the war's end in 1865 to 1877. However, many scholars argue that Reconstruction lasted well into the 1880s and beyond.
And a chronological definition aside, Reconstruction can be understood as a historical process without any fixed endpoint. It is the process by which the U.S. tried to come to terms with the momentous results of the Civil War, especially the destruction of slavery.
The war destroyed the institution of slavery, ensured the survival of the Union, and set in motion economic and political changes that laid the foundation for the modern era.
Reconstruction is unfamiliar to many Americans, yet it remains part of our lives. Many argue that key issues confronting American society today are in some ways Reconstruction questions. Who is entitled to citizenship? Who should enjoy the right to vote? Should the laws protect the rights of aliens as well as citizens?
How should the equal protection of the laws be defined and guaranteed?
What should the balance of power between the federal government and the states? What should be the balance of power between the federal governments and the states?
And how should Americans be protected from the depredations of terrorists?
During Reconstruction, a new definition of American citizenship, incorporating equal rights regardless of race, was written into the Constitution. Sundry obstacles confronted those seeking to implement the idea of equal rights for Black Americans.
Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, in celebration of Juneteenth, we celebrate the activism of our heroic ancestors, whose intrepid advocacy helped shape the debate and framework for the abolition of slavery and equal rights of Black people from 1865 to 1877. To help guide us along tonight for what we hope will be an inspiring journey, our special guest is a native North Carolinian and holds a BA in political science from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and both a master's in African American Studies and a PhD in American Studies from Yale University. In 2016, he was named a fellow of the John Simon Guggenheim Foundation and visiting professor of gender and sexuality at Harvard University. In 2018, he became Harvard's first professor of studies of women, gender, and sexuality. His essays have appeared in Callaloo, Social Texts, African American Review, American Literary History, After Image, Radical America, and American Literature. He has been a fellow of the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation, the Bagacio Foundation, I know I messed that up, and the National Endowment for the Humanities. In 2015, he was inducted into the Johns Hopkins Society of Scholars. Please welcome, ladies and gentlemen, famed scholar, author of, I'm telling you, this is a lot, but you need to know this. He is the author of Conjugal Union, The Body, the House, and the Black American and Black Gay Man Essays, professor of studies of women, gender, and sexuality at Harvard University, Dr. Robert Reid-Pharr.
Wow. Wow.
Hey, Robert.
I'm all up in my feelings now.
Hey, I'm sorry. And please forgive me if but you know what? I have rehearsed that 16 times today. And I just wanted to make sure that I got it right, Dr. Reid-Pharr, because you are just truly amazing. And we are so happy that you are here. And I just didn't want to mess anything up. So thank you.
Not only did you not mess anything up. One, I insist that you call me Robert. Dr. Reid-Pharr sounds like you're talking to my father. But two, I wanted to say that I was so impressed with the gloss that you guys just gave of what happened in the Reconstruction period. And because it is so clear that no American people, including African-American people, have really been schooled in what basically happened in that moment and how central African-American people were to not only our gaining our own freedom and establishing ourselves as citizens in this country, but also to guaranteeing citizenship rights for the entirety of the US population, and those citizenship rights standing as the basis for many human rights campaigns and civil rights struggles, not only in this country, but in the world. So you guys tore that up. So, my job here is easy,
Well, we know we only have you for a short time. So if you don't mind, we're going to jump right into the questions,
Please.
Robert, because want to make sure that our viewers get a good feel of who Robert is on our show tonight. So let's start.
Nice. So you mentioned that a lot of people don't really know what really happened during the course of emancipation and the history of Black people getting their citizenship.
Right.
One thing in particular that I learned during the course of putting together the show with Saladin is that when Lincoln was trying to abolish slavery, there were multiple components to this program. One was it was a gradual emancipation as opposed to, hey, on Tuesday, everybody's free. Secondly, there was supposed to be monetary compensation to slaveholders for the property that they were losing with their slaves. And then there was also this colonization piece where the government was actually encouraging people to migrate to Africa, to Haiti, and to Central America. During this time, who were some of the opponents of Lincoln's proposed abolition of slavery? And how did these activists respond to this idea of colonization?
Well, this is a very interesting point because you actually see people in 19th century Black intellectuals on both sides of this argument from very early in the century on. So it doesn't actually cut exactly left and right. This is what I can say though about especially the story that you talk about with abolition. In 1827 is the period when the United States enters what we think of as the antebellum period. And really what that means is that from 1827 forward, in 1827, slavery ends in New York State. That means that slavery is now something that is basically in the Southeast. And the reason I say that is that when you saw the abolishment of slavery in 1827, it was based on the idea of gradual abolition. So the fact that you were, it depends on what your age was. If you were a child, you were enslaved for longer. And so part of this idea of we can actually have gradual abolishment of slavery was something that had in fact been happening in the country at the time. And also part of the reason I bring up this 1827 point is at that point, there was this belief that, oh my gosh, you can't have all of these Black people who are free persons still in the country. So you started to see the development of colonizationist ideas among white persons that were both resisted and accepted by some aspects of the Black community, both with the idea that we should, in fact, get out of this white supremacist country, and with the idea that, in fact, we're the most American people who they are. So I wish that I could give you a more succinct answer, but I'm telling you that it's something that began not simply with Lincoln. It began really 40 years earlier, people talking about what are you going to do about a newly freed population, because in one part of the country, you had a very large newly freed population that ended up being just as radical as I think some of the white folks who would like to have seen them transported to Central America or to Africa thought they were going to be, as a matter of fact.
Okay. Wow. So, Robert, though the Emancipation Proclamation, which was a presidential decree used as a war tactic by Lincoln, emancipated people, it didn't abolish the legal status of slaves or the state laws establishing slavery. So how did Black activists galvanize their resources to continue the fight for abolition? And who were some of the key players during that time?
One of the things that I'm going to be a broken record about with you guys is to say that we need to begin actually a little bit before 1865, and we probably need to begin again as early as the first sizable free Black populations in the Northeast. And the reason I say that is that we see that the last Northeastern population of Black persons is liberated, if you will, and it's starting to have what are called colored conventions. And colored conventions are happening all over the country. The first one is in Ohio in 1830. By the time you get to 1890, so really the close of the Reconstruction period, and all through the Civil War, there have been 200 of these conventions. So you're seeing literally thousands of persons using their resources to sue state governments, to assist people trying to reestablish themselves after enslavement, to fight against segregation laws that are developing in a piecemeal fashion all over the country. So it wasn't that there are individuals who are famed for the work that they did. Obviously, someone like Frederick Douglass would be at the center of that. However, there were hundreds of activists, and in fact, thousands of activists around African-American people's civil liberties and around resistance to segregation policies and black codes, they were called, long before the close of slavery for the whole country. So you begin in the 1830s and you see the same population of people being augmented by newly freed people who are struggling against newly developing black codes in former Confederate states, I should say. So it was a big push. Can I just say one other thing about it? And part of the reason I'm so passionate about it
please.
Is that one of the things that W.E.B. Du Bois says to us in his groundbreaking work that you guys should read, Black Reconstruction, is that the way that we talk about the cessation of slavery and the beginning of Reconstruction is that it's something that white folks did for black people. That's a lie. Then the truth of the matter is that you saw the massive amount of activism around the close of slavery and the enactment of black civil rights in this country were happening by black persons. Some of them really recently freed or persons who had taken their freedom. And two, that the reason that he says that the Civil War was won was because you saw a massive general strike on the part of enslaved people who said, you know what, we're not going to feed these Confederate soldiers, and we're not going to plant these crops, and we're going to deal with food shortages and lack of materials ourselves, and we're going to run away at the very first step that we can actually run away. And that is going to do what is going to actually tilt the Civil War in the favor of the Union versus in the favor of the Confederacy. I believe Du Bois on that. And I think that one of the things I want to move away from is that there are very, very special black people who, you know, in 1830, 1840, 1850, 1860, 1870, actually helped to move our community ahead. No, it was that our community, as it does all the time, created people who were figureheads for and leaders of mass organization on the part of both free people and enslaved people before the close of slavery in 1865. If you want me to, I'll stop that, but I'll just say that I wanted to say that you guys are exactly right to talk about the fact that the Emancipation Proclamation is not the thing that ends slavery. The Emancipation Proclamation is the thing that ends slavery in the rebel states. Slavery is ended, I think it's December 6th,
December 18th, 1865.
With the 13th Amendment.
I'll talk more about that in a second too.
The 13th Amendment ends enslavement. The 14th Amendment establishes, which is in 1868, establishes citizenship rights for all persons born in the United States. And I just want to talk about that or who are naturalized. And I just want to talk about that for a minute. And the 15th Amendment gives effectively African-American men voting rights. The reason I want to talk about the 14th Amendment, which says that a citizen is a person who is born in the United States, is because the reason for that is that it said that all of these Black persons who were born here, whose grandparents were born here, whose great-grandparents were born here, are in fact citizens, and that any person who is born on this soil is in fact a citizen. I'm livid about Donald Trump and company saying that we're going to struggle against immigrant children who are being born here by parents who are undocumented as citizens. I don't care what the hell they say. This is something that is a right that was secured by our ancestors, our enslaved ancestors. And it is one of the things that makes the United States a beautiful country. Black people should be particularly enraged about it. It's an insult to our people. And the idea that if the child is born on this land, as it is an American child and we will care for it, that's a beautiful idea. Right. That is the best of who we are. Why would we not want to get rid of that? I don't care what the kid looks like or where the mom's mom. Well, I'm off of my own. I'm off of my own.
Okay.
No, we love it.
I don't care where the daddy's from either. I'm sorry, I'll stop being mean about that.
No. All right. and Vash?
Yeah, I mean, this is just,
I'm sorry.
No, it's great because, what you talked about is how people were actually part of the movement from the beginning.
Yeah.
So, I think that's amazing. So how did protests in the mid-1800s compare to protests that happen today?
It's interesting because any type of protesting, can I say it? I'm going to say it one way and then I'll say it a trickier way. Any type of protesting was dangerous as hell. Yeah. So, and any type of protesting of a Black person, well, this is still true today, but any type of protesting of a Black person the person had to be aware of his or her safety, and also that they're being judged about their humanities, literal humanities being judged. So one of the things that you see in any type of public presentation of Black persons from the middle of the 19th century is that not only were they, anytime they're imaged, they're being imaged in this, and they've had any choice at all at getting themselves prepared for it, they're super dressed. And they're super concerned to have, especially remember, photography is a new 19th century phenomenon. Photography, or certainly any type of sketching, you want to have the best representation of the African-American community that you can possibly have. And so from the very beginning, you see this fussiness in the middle of the 19th century and earlier than that in Black life with self-presentation. Like, we are huffy people about how you look in public, and we're particularly huffy about how you protest in public. But obviously there's not going to be a lot of, there's never going to be the type of rioting that we've seen. Now, in earlier periods, certainly in the 18th century, we saw slave insurrections in the United States, but we never saw the type of development of maroon communities, so communities of people that have fully freed themselves in the United States in the way that we see in Haiti, obviously, in Jamaica, Brazil.
I'd like to add to what you said, because my friend Mary Christ, her parents Mary's white. Her parents were hippies. And they told her, when you go to a protest, if you have a suit, you wear a suit. Because the people who watch those protests need to know that the people who are protesting wear suits to work, are of a certain socioeconomic background and support. So you get to see this rainbow representation, not just wearing your sandals and your summer gear because you know it's going to be hot. Represent who you are in society so people see who you are.
Vash, can I say one of the things about part of dress in terms of protest, in terms of everyday protest? Certainly, if you're talking about enslaved persons, formerly enslaved persons, that one of the things that immediately happened when enslaved persons had any opportunity to do so was adornment. And so women buying ribbons for themselves, men buying jackets for themselves, men buying new shirts for themselves, and being concerned with the care of that gear and displaying that gear. The way that we think about it is, isn't it funny that, these people were being so jolly with, their newfound freedom. But the truth of the matter is that people were beaten up and killed over matters like that. And so that part of what you see, and had been, particularly in Louisiana, codes against allowing colored women or black women to actually wear certain types of adornment because they were rocking it out, And so the issue is that when people are presenting themselves in ways that said that I'm something other than a worker, that's already protest. And it becomes, and certainly in our generation, I don't think that we get it, that you get punched in the face over that. You can get shot over that. And there were everyday incidents, particularly during Reconstruction, of people actually walking down the street to prove that they could in fact walk in a jacket and slacks, and a woman in a dress that she's put a lot of attention into, without being thrown into the mud or kicked in the back, which happened all the time. So we forget that the sort of policing of black people on the street is something that previously every white person could do. And so and a lot of the policing was about you were coming out of your place in terms of how you were presenting yourself in public. How dare you do that? And with lots of pushback, though, of black people, and also people who you're talking 13-year-old girls are doing this, as a way to say, we're going to own the street. We're going to be in the street as full citizens, and we're going to wear what we want to wear.
This touches on a little bit why Monique is so upset about women showing up in bonnets, which ties into this whole present yourself as something, but that's neither here nor there. Go ahead, Saladin.
Yeah, just to echo on the statement you just made, Robert, even in the days leading up to Congress convening to vote on the Civil Rights Act of 1875, there were Black congressmen who were traveling to DC from their jurisdictions across the South, who were kicked off of streetcars or rail cars. They weren't allowed to eat at certain restaurants. It was ridiculous. I'd also like to take this time just to clarify a few dates so that we really have a comprehensive understanding of our history. And so Robert touched on this a little bit earlier, but I'll just go on and say that, the Emancipation Proclamation was a presidential proclamation and an executive order that was issued by President Abraham Lincoln on September 22nd, 1862. On January 1st, 1863, the Emancipation Proclamation changed the legal status under federal law of more than 3.5 million enslaved African Americans in the Confederate States, from enslaved to free. However, as Robert indicated a few moments ago, the Emancipation Proclamation did not abolish the institution of slavery. The Emancipation Proclamation freed Black people in Confederate States during the Civil War if they managed to successfully escape to Union lines or happened upon Union soldiers. On December 18th, 1865, Secretary of State William H. Seward certified the 13th Amendment had become part of the Constitution. That date marked the final end of slavery throughout the United States. December 18th, 1865 marked the final end of slavery throughout the United States. Section 1 of the 13th Amendment states, "Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as punishment for crime, I know, don't be triggered. Stay with me, everybody. Whereof the party shall have been duly convicted shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. Many Black people long celebrated January 1st, the effective date of the Emancipation Proclamation instead. Now we celebrate Juneteenth. Juneteenth commemorates June 19th, 1865, when Union General Gordon Granger, having arrived in Texas the previous day, proclaimed the end of slavery throughout the United States. Though the 13th Amendment's approval would come a few months later, officially abolishing the institution of slavery, the defeat of the Confederate Army equaled the emancipation of all Black people, no matter their geographic location within the US. In 1948, at the urging of Harry S. Truman, Congress established February 1st, the anniversary of Lincoln's signing of the text of the 13th Amendment, as National Freedom Day, but December 18th has long been forgotten. I believe September 22nd, the day before my birthday, by the way, December 18th, and even April 9th, 1865, when the American Civil War ended, should each be celebrated as federal holidays. Robert, how do you feel about those dates being celebrated as federal holidays?
Absolutely. I'm an easy one on that. You know, how do you feel?
You said,
I think we should write to our congressmen and fight for them to lobby for those dates to become federal holidays.
And look, I'm sitting here with a pad and on my phone trying to write down all the dates that Saladin is shooting out. Okay, because I mean, I might have to circle back to you, Saladin, on that, because wow, you gave us a lot of dates, and so okay. I'm circling back to you a little later, but can I move to my next question for Robert?
That's fine.
Okay. The 13th Amendment inadvertently created a loophole that would allow for the widespread leasing of convict laborers to plantations, mines, and industries in the South. Convict leasing began as a cost-saving measure during Reconstruction, but only expanded after white supremacist Democrats regained control of Southern governments and enacted laws greatly expanding the number of crimes that constituted felonies. So, Robert, who were the voices that envisioned what abolition truly meant, and who had the courage to put to quill and paper what kind of society should emerge from the ashes of slavery? And know, when I did my homework, Frederick Douglass's name kept coming up for me. So I just want to say that.
You know what? I don't know the person to. That's a great question. I don't know the person to lead you to in terms of convict leasing. Who was the person who was going to actually was taking that on directly. The person who first came to mind is in fact a person who's did no work on convict leasing, but who was part of a tradition of very, very left progressive Black journalism that existed from the close of the Civil War until now. With the center of that being someone like I'd be Wells Barnett. But I agree with you 100% that this issue of convict leasing, and also the idea that one's civil rights can be taken from one because of crime. The thing that you said was that it was an inadvertent outcome of the law. I'm not certain how inadvertent it actually was. The truth of the matter is that we really do need to get to a new understanding of our prisons and figure out how it is that we're going to actually move to prison abolition. Just before I end, that the people that you want to read on this are our sister Angela Davis, who has done amazing work on prison abolition, having been a prisoner herself. And also, I would very, very, very much encourage people to read Angela Davis's autobiography that details a lot of her time actually in prison. She knows what it is that she's talking about. And then the other three people doing amazing work around prison reform in this country include Ruth Wilson Gilmore, who is just really an amazing person, talking about the way that these leasing systems actually bled out of the South and went to California as well, and you actually see prisons turning into these money-making schemes for governments and for private corporations. So those are the two names I'll give people who are really excited about that work, which needs to be done, and which I agree with you, Alvin, comes directly to us out of slavery and Reconstruction.
Great.
Yes,
Thank you for
some
that,
of the things
Robert.
that we talked about.
Just to go back to.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Vash.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to ask Robert, what role did Black newspapers and organizations play in securing Black male suffrage, equality before the law, equal access regardless of race to public schools and transportation, and the division of plantation among the free people? Were there any particular Black newspapers and organizations who really provided a lot of thought, leadership, and activism during that time?
Well, again, one of the things to remember is that part of the reason that Black people could be so nationally consistent about what it is that they were trying to do had to do with, in fact, this development of secondary Black organizations and secondary Black institutions, or secondary or second to the United States, I'll say, but Black-only organizations and institutions that allow Black people to actually think about who we want to be as a national community. So I already talked to you about the color conventions, which were happening in large numbers in the 1840s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. But also, probably an important thing for us to remember here is that we see most of the HBCUs are going to be founded in many of HBCUs are going to be founded in the Reconstruction. And so one of the things that happens is you start to see those places being used as locations by which to forward ideas about how it is that Black communities are actually going to work. In terms of newspapers, Saladin, part of the problem with that is that newspapers after Reconstruction or during Reconstruction explode. So it's not just that there's one Black newspaper, Freedom's Journal in New York City, Frederick Douglass's paper in New York State, or the papers in Washington, D.C. It's that by the time you get to the turn of the century, you start to get into a situation in which most Black communities are actually going to have Black newspapers, and many, many Black communities are going to have all Black schools. So, the way that we actually start to do that work is to build other types of institutions. Secondly, all Black religious institutions, the African Methodist Episcopal Church, the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church, and also Black portions of traditional congregations, the Baptist Church, for example, became extremely empowered and extremely active in terms of pushing for civil rights change in the United States. An interesting thing that I think people forget is that the reason we say the Reconstruction ends in 1777 is because Union troops left, and you really begin what's thought of as the nadir of African American life, which begins at the period after Reconstruction. Certainly, we know that that lynching is going to continue in the country unabated and actually eclipse by the time you get to the turn of the century. But people think somehow that was an explosion that ended Black political insurgency. Actually, in 1898, you see the last of the Black Reconstruction congressman is removed from office. He came from Wilmington, where there's a massive race riot in Wilmington to remove the last Black political power in Congress. But that community and many other communities in this country were in very good shape at around the turn of the century, because they were continuing to fight against the real monster of white supremacy that was happening, and the real monster of pushing Black people out of political life. It takes until about the early part of the 20th century. And I want to say something that you said earlier about Reconstruction, and I'll leave it alone, is that Reconstruction as a set of political and structural goals in the country really does push into the 20th century in terms of how the country starts to imagine race. A quick matter is that in 1898, the United States fights a war with Cuba and Spain, the Spanish-Cuban American War. The United States wins very easily and becomes the owner, effectively, of Guam, Puerto Rico, and also develops a special relationship with Cuba. The interesting thing is that there was always a desire to bring those islands make them states, but the hostility of it, said from the bench of the Supreme Court, was that we already have enough people of color. We cannot have all people of color states, majority people of color states in the United States. And so at the moment at which you're seeing the development of anti-segregation laws against Black people, you're seeing people of color, Asian and Latino people actually kept out of the country because they're not so much better than Black people. Those traditions didn't change. Exclusion of people because of their race from U.S. immigration until I think 1964 in the U.S. Immigration Naturalization Act. So this vulgar pill of anti-Black racism affects how we treat everybody. You want to know how the anti-Asian violence that has grotesquely been happening in this country is attached to anti-Black violence? It's always been attached. Is the answer. There never was a moment when those weren't the two things. Those weren't exactly the same personnel doing that. So again, my thing is, it's not so much that there's these amazing personnel who have done it and these amazing genius people, there have been, but that we've all been in this struggle, your grandmama and them included, from the very jump.
Well, you said your grandmama included.
I said your grandmama and
you said your grandmama and
your
them.
grandma and them.
Did you have you had a question before Saladin spoke?
Yeah, I'm going to ask it, but I want to make sure that we move into our segment of what y'all said, where we really do open it up to the people who are watching, because their input is oh so important. So Robert, during this segment, we make sure that we listen to our audience and we ask them questions and we really pay attention to what they've said and get their input and feedback. So they're probably going to ask some questions and we want to make sure we get to those right away. When we talked about colonization, Scott did mention that Marcus Garvey had some initiatives to promote immigration to Africa as an example of people responding to this whole colonization.
Right.
So I definitely want to make sure that we look at that. What I did want to talk about was that the whole prison industrial complex that is still ongoing, which is putting Black people into prison for long periods of time so that their labor can be used for the most part as an extension of slave labor, was something that came up during the research. Will you talk a little bit about how that was enacted into law and how it continues?
Well, Saladin was right that in the first place, the way in which the 13th Amendment is written is that it allows for no enslavement except in the case of a person whose civil rights have been taken from him or her because they've been judged to be guilty of a crime. That comes to us from the middle of the 19th century. It immediately became something that was used against Black populations in order to, in fact, round up huge amounts of Black men and women, primarily Black men, but also Black women, because of the fact that they were, in fact, had no labor, that they had no other industries that they could move to, and yet they didn't want to work on plantations as enforced labor. Certainly, vagrancy laws in this country have always been laws that are based on make Black people go to work. And so make Black and brown people go to work. So they were used greatly against us. And also we know full well that one of the things that has happened is that you see more Black men and women in prisons at moments at which the type of work that Black people do or have traditionally done becomes redundant. And so it's a way to warehouse people and also to extract more value literally from their bodies.
Yeah.
What I don't know is how to actually get people to change on that. That's a conversation that you have to have with people who believe that prisons are good and positive things. Right. And I don't know what it is I actually don't know why it is that we're so unbelievably afraid of each other in those ways, that we can't actually move forward on this thing that is built 100% in the idea of controlling a newly freed Black population and exploiting that population.
Yeah. Excuse me, Vash, if I may, if I could, I need to go back a bit because my teleprompter was moving a bit too fast, and I want to make sure that we put up Robert's books, Conjugal Union. Oh. If we could put the books up, Conjugal Union, The Body, the House, and the Black American, and his book, Black Gay Man Essays. please go out and get these books. I apologize once again. I wanted to make sure that I put them up and that all of our viewers got a chance to see your reading. So thank you so much. Sorry to interrupt, Vash. Sorry about that.
No worries, no worries. Karen has said, learning from this conversation that we're having, so wow, prison is a way to keep slavery continuing. And
that's the smartest thing that's been said.
Yeah, that is true.
Well, I think a lot of our audience members have said smart things, including those like James Tate, who just said, "Good evening, gentlemen." I think that's particularly good to have you around, James. So our show is honoring Juneteenth.
Right.
To lighten things up a little bit, I just wanted to ask you, Robert, do you celebrate Juneteenth? And if so, how do you do it?
I do. You know, my thing is, part of the reason part of what makes me, I'm actually a quite formal thinker, and I'm very, very involved in archives, and I do materials-based work. If you can't show me the piece of paper that proves it, then I don't believe it.
Okay.
And so part of the thing that, part of the reason I'm so like that is because, you know, I am really, I don't believe exactly that our history has been hidden from us. That's the way that we need to say it. I believe that our history is actually, that we have an amazing opportunity to find out what the truth is and to get involved in the rather large amount of archival materials that we have available to us. Now, I understand that there's a history of slavery that we can't know, but there's a hell of a lot that we can.
Yes.
And so part of the reason I celebrate Juneteenth is that I'm so moved and excited about African American life and culture of people who were struggling against enslavement in, not in 1850, but in 1619 and 1620 and 1621 and 1721 and 1784 and 1819, and knew that they were doing so.
And 1776.
You know, and so I think that we need to celebrate where we have come from, because in fact, we've done a hell of a lot of stuff in a very relatively short amount of time. African American people were, as a group, enslaved for longer than we have not been enslaved. You know, that's an important thing for us to remember. And when you get into the sort of, let me get into bravado about what we've become, remember who that really has done that. And also at the moment, and also enslaved persons and people in the Reconstruction period, newly freed persons, wildly directed not only African American life and culture, but also American political life. Really did. We would be a horrific country without Black people. We know that. And that doesn't say that everybody else is not bringing amazing things, but I just think we need to embrace our history really. And I'm not even all mushy spiritual about it, but I'm like, you know, let's look at the as facts now, and let's look at what has in fact has happened, and look at the resources that we actually do have available to move forward.
I have a question for you. Critical race theory is a big thing that's being considered and talked about right now. What do you think about that and it being taught?
Okay, so first things first. You know, I was around for the development of people who were talking about something called critical race theory. And it's something that largely came to us out of legal theory. What that phrase actually meant has no relationship to what people are talking about on Fox television. So if you're asking me the question, should we be talking about the way in which all of the United States population has contributed to all of the history of the country and all of its institutions, I'm 100% behind that. Should we be talking about white supremacy, white skin privilege as a fundamental reality of the United States and its history? I'm all about that. And what I don't care about at all, and I think people shouldn't get caught up in, is that I think that the boogeyman of critical race theory is something that the right is doing, but that when you get down to the grounds of the actual important work that people are doing, that they're doing it in all sorts of ways. And I think the critical race theory is something that's actually a minority of it's actually a phrase from a very specific thing that's now being used for a much larger group of stuff. Long story short, I stay off of the internet a little bit. I stay off of the blogs and I don't listen to my Twitter so much, because I think that there's a way in which I'm old enough to say that this blow up around critical race theory won't be here next year. I guarantee you.
It's definitely a marketing thing. One last thing from our viewing audience, from Keith J. He says, what can we do to nurture and prepare and keep young people hopeful today as it relates to the newest backlash?
I don't know that. I don't know the answer to that question. I will tell you what I say to everybody. Yeah. I am as hopeful in my life for change in the United States of America as I've ever been.
Yeah.
I am so proud of, I'm going to get all emotional. I'm so proud of, the whole Black Lives Matter thing. I also am was horrified by watching a human being die. And am horrified by what's happening in this country. But all of those, what I think of them as those kids out in the street, with their protesting. I don't care what they say, what the right wing says in this country. Those were patriots, and I am committed, as who I am now, to using my skill set to give those kids a leg up that I didn't have. How about that?
I agree with you, and I think that's super fantastic. I want to thank everybody for commenting, and Robert, I want to thank you for responding so beautifully to their questions.
Of course, thank you.
It's really great. Everyone, we put a question of the week up on our Facebook page and on our Instagram. So if you have not followed, please follow us. We are He Said Live on Instagram, on Facebook. We've got a YouTube page, which has clips that go up. We're on Twitter. We're everywhere you can possibly have us. So thank you. Keep in touch because we like hearing what y'all said. Alvin?
Thank you, Vash. Wow, what an enlightening discussion. We have one more segment that we need to get through. And this week, we normally have the Black Excellence, but tonight we're going to have the pop-up because we got a couple of things that we think that you want to know about. For all of you literary folks out there, as you know, on June the 8th, Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, a man with a lisp, released her new children's book, The Bench. Yes. The Duchess tapped award-winning Californian artist Christian Robinson, an American illustrator of children's books and an animator to illustrate her new children's book, which is inspired by her husband, Prince Harry, and her son, Archie. In a statement announcing The Bench, the Duchess said she wanted the story to be told through an inclusive lens to feature a diverse group of father and sons. Christian Robinson, now 35 years old, was born in Hollywood, California, but he resides in Sacramento, California now. He grew up in a small one-bedroom apartment with his brother, two cousins, an aunt, and his grandmother. Drawing became a way to make space for himself and to create the kind of world he wanted to see. He studied animation at the California Institute of the Arts and would later work with Sesame Street Workshop and Pixar Animation Studios before becoming an illustrator of books for children. His books include Gaston and Antoinette, written by Kelly DiPuccio, and the #1 New York Times bestseller, Last Stop on Market Street, written by Matt Della Pina, which was awarded a Caldecott Honor, a Coretta Scott King Illustrator Honor, and the Newbery Medal. In an interview with children's literature website Brightly, Christian opened up about his love of the art and said, as a child, I love making things, drawings, painting, sculpture, anything I could get my hands on. Creativity allowed me to be in charge, to make my own rules and create my own little world on paper, he said. The artist also revealed he found inspiration in vintage children's books from the 1950s and the 1960s, nature, animation, and children's art, even fine arts. He also revealed he produced his award-winning illustrations in an old warehouse that has been now reconverted into a shared artist studio. In 2019, he told Book Riot his first part of designing a book was the cover. I'm sorry, his favorite part of designing a book was a cover. He said, there's such an opportunity to set the scene and invite readers into the world of the story, he said. It is the most challenging, but also the most rewarding part because it is what gives readers a first impression And as we all know, we totally judge books by their covers, he said. In 2020, he illustrated You Matter, a book that promoted seeing the world from different points of view, which aimed to help parents teach their children about empathy. Ladies, he said, family, we have chosen Kristen Robinson as the guy we want to tell you about. He is young, he is smart, he's talented, he's creative. Please go out. I ordered actually the bench yesterday. I haven't gotten it, but I ordered it because of him. So keep your eyes on Christian, please. And lastly, in our pop-up, I know many of you, like me, were sitting in front of your television last Sunday when you are waiting for the season finale of Pose to come on. I mean, if you wasn't, then you were absolutely out of your mind. Okay, but within 3 seasons, the groundbreaking series took many of us on a journey down memory lane of what it was like to live through the 80s and the 90s during the onset of the AIDS crisis. For those of you who don't know what the show is about, and you've come from under your rock for me to tell you, Pose is an American drama television series about New York City's African-American and Latino, LGBTQ, and gender non-conforming drag ball culture scene in the 80s. And in the second season, they featured that same scene in the 90s. The show's characters are dancers and models who compete for trophies and recognition in the underground culture and who support one another in a network of chosen families. So what I've done tonight, because many of you are wondering, because I see you on social media, what are the actors going to do now? The main characters in particular. Well, trust and believe, they have upset Hollywood. So I just want you all to know that right now. They have upset Hollywood, so they are not going anywhere. And in fact, they are actually doing a lot of things. So first, I'm gonna focus on Miss India Moore, who played the role of Angel. So if we could, the picture of Miss Moore, this is India with her beautiful self.
Beautiful.
India will be featured in the upcoming film Escape Room, Tournament of Champions in theaters on July the 16th as Brianna, starring beside actors Taylor Russell and Logan Miller. So watch out for that.
Okay, India. Okay, India.
Okay, so and for those of you who was wondering what Candy was doing, Miss Angela Ross, you know, the girl who carried the hammer throughout the season until she died, she is staying with Ryan Murphy in his universe for the upcoming 10th season of American Horror Story coming later this year.
Wow.
But after becoming a self-taught computer coder, Angela Ross went on to become the founder and CEO of TransTech Social Enterprises, a firm that helps employ transgender people in the tech industry.
Wow.
All right, so watch out for her. And then there's the electrifying Electra, okay, Miss Dominique Jackson. Now, you know, Dominique is going to be busy, but she just got married and she's enjoying married life. And for those of you all who want to see what she's doing or what she's buying, she was just on House Hunters with her new husband buying a home. So go back to your DVR or whatever you have to do to find that and check out what Miss Dominique Jackson is doing. And last but not least is Mr. Billy Porter, Mr. Pray Tell, who actually stole the show. We all know that Billy Porter is a triple, double, quadruple threat. Amazing. Or whatever. He's going to be starring as the Fab G, the fairy godparent in the new Cinderella remake. He's also a voice in the Proud Family reboot, of which I didn't know about the show until I started doing research. And if you have your surprise face on like me, Billy Porter has just launched a new shoe line. Okay, so I can't wait to see what that's going to do. I also want to tell you all, MJ Rodriguez, who played Blanca, she is going to be in an Apple TV comedy with Maya Rudolph from SNL, who's also the daughter of Minnie Riperton. And last but not least, you've been asking about Damon. He was only in 1 season. Damon is Ryan Jamal Swain. I'm sorry, he was only in 1 show for this season, and that is because tragedy hit his life during the taping of the show. His sister was tragically killed. So, ladies and gentlemen, for the pop-up, I just wanted you to know the Pose actors are doing their thing. Thank you for letting me bring this to you, because I'm sure all of you really wanted to know. So thank you all very much for that. Thank you. That's the pop-up.
Well done.
Thank you. Have we, oh my God, it's 8 o'clock and we have reached the end of the show. So let me first of all thank Dr. Robert Reid-Pharr. Thank you.
Wait a minute, Dr. Robert Reid-Pharr thanks you back.
We really appreciate you coming on tonight.
Fantastic show. I'm a fan.
Thank you. Well, we hope that you will watch, and I know that there's a point where I'm sure Saladin and Vash and Jacques and I will talk about bringing you back. But thanks again for joining us tonight. And ladies and gentlemen, next week, please tune in for our Father's Day show. We are actually having a show called Phenomenal Fathers, and we are bringing Mr. Alvin McCrae and and Jason M. Rudman on the show. They are a phenomenal couple who have started a scholarship foundation for LGBTQ students and transgendered students. And so you have to see what they're doing. They're doing wonderful things. And before we leave tonight, our words of the week is, anytime anyone is enslaved or in any way deprived of his liberty, if that person is a human being, as far as I'm concerned, he is justified to resort to whatever methods necessary to bring about the liberty again. And those were words from the renowned human rights activist, Malcolm X. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight on He Said. Thanks again to Saladin there for producing this show tonight. You did a wonderful job. We appreciate you, Vash. You were just always off the hook, off the chain, my anchor. And again, Dr. Robert Reid-Pharr, thank you for joining us tonight.
You're welcome. And thank you.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you. And viewers, thank you for tuning in. You could be somewhere else at 7 o'clock, but you with us. And we appreciate it. Okay?
We love it.
Have a good weekend.
Bye. Thank you, Robert.
Bye.